arson, the killing, has a purpose. The purpose, we're told again and again, is to end racist police violence against African Americans. We are told that that is the single greatest scourge in this country.
For the past 400 years stemming from slavery, there has been a genocide of black people in this country.
I'm sick and tired of seeing black men and women be killed and nothing be done about it.
We had a black man in the office, bro, they were still killing us, bro.
Stop killing us. It's chilling. And if you believe it and you're a decent person, you will be moved by it because it's awful. No American should ever be mistreated by those in authority, much less killed. The abuse of power is always and everywhere a sin, and it's increasingly common here. We should always work to end it. In this case, the death of a man at the hands of police in Minneapolis turned out to be a metaphor for abuse of power. That death has led to demands that we fire the nearly 700,000 police officers who work in the United States, and that we free the 1.5 million criminals who are now behind bars. In America, Joe Biden told us recently, quote, just the color of your skin puts your life at risk. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey strongly agreed with that. Quote, we have so many people in our country, Booker said yesterday, African American men, mostly unarmed, being murdered by police officers and no way of holding them accountable. So many people murdered by police officers, unarmed, says Cory Booker. You're hearing a lot of people in authority tell you that, every day, every hour. One group of pro athletes just announced that, quote, it seems like every week a new tragedy unfolds before our very eyes where people are being killed by police violence. Each time we tweet, we pray, we mourn, only to repeat the cycle a few days later, end quote. In the words of Ben Crump, who's the lawyer representing George Floyd's family in Minneapolis, what we're witnessing here in America is, quote, genocide. Genocide. If you believed we were seeing genocide, then you might understand the riots now in progress. There's nothing worse than genocide. But is it happening? Is any of this true? We should find out. Facts matter. What exactly are the numbers? We found the numbers, and we're going to go through them with you in some detail tonight because it's worth it. Since 2015, the Washington Post has maintained a comprehensive database of fatal police shootings in this country. Last year, the Post logged a total of 1,004 killings. Of the 802 shootings in which the race of the police officer and the suspect was noted, 371 of those killed were white, 236 were black. The vast majority of those killed were not, in fact, unarmed. The vast majority were armed, and African-American suspects were significantly more likely to have a deadly weapon than white suspects. Yet more white suspects were killed. Overall, there were a total of precisely 10 cases in the United States last year, according to the Washington Post, in which unarmed African Americans were fatally shot by the police. There were 9 men and 1 woman. Now, as we said, a lot is at stake. The country is at stake. So we want to take the time now to go through these case by case into the specifics. The first was a man called Chinara Feek. He was killed by a Knoxville police officer called Dylan Williams. According to Williams, Feek attacked him, choked him, and then used a taser on him, the suspect on the police officer, before the officer shot him. 5 eyewitnesses corroborated the officer's claim, and the officer was not charged. The second case concerns a man called Marcus McVeigh. He was, by any description, a career criminal from San Angelo, Texas. He'd been convicted of aggravated assault, assault on a public servant, and organized criminal activity. At the time he was killed, he was wanted on drug dealing charges. The Texas state trooper pulled him over. McVeigh fled in his car, then he fled on foot into the woods. There he fought with a trooper and was shot and killed. The officer was not charged in that case. Marzua Scott assaulted a shop employee. When a female police officer arrived and ordered the suspect toward her car, he instead charged her and knocked her to the ground. At that point, she shot and killed him. The entire incident was caught on body camera. The officer was not charged. Ryan Twyman was being approached by 2 LA County deputies when he backed into one of them with his vehicle. The deputy was caught in the car door. He and his partner opened fire. The deputies were not charged in that case. Melvin Watkins of East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was shot by a deputy after he allegedly drove his car toward the deputy at high speed. The deputy was not charged. Isaiah Lewis, meanwhile, wasn't just unarmed. He was completely naked. Williams broke into a house and then attacked a police officer. The police tased Williams, but he kept coming at them and attacking. The officer shot him. They were not charged. Atiana Johnson Jefferson was shot by a Fort Worth deputy called Aaron Dean. A neighbor had called a non-emergency number after seeing Johnson's door open, thinking something might be wrong. Police arrived. Johnson saw them approach from a window and was holding a gun at the time. According to body camera footage, the officer shot Johnson within seconds. Jefferson, that officer, has been charged with homicide. Christopher Whitfield was shot and killed in a place called Ethel, Louisiana. He'd robbed a gas station. Deputy Glenn Sims said his gun discharged accidentally while grappling with Whitfield's. Sims, who is black himself, was not charged in that killing. Kevin Mason was shot by police during a multi-hour standoff. While Mason turned out not to have a gun, Mason claimed to have a gun, claimed to be armed, and vowed to kill police with it. They believed him. Mason had been in a shootout with police years before. And finally, the 10th case concerns Gregory Griffin. He was shot during a car chase. An officer called Giovanni Crespo claimed he saw someone pointing a gun at him. Later, a gun was in fact found inside the vehicle, and yet Officer Crespo was charged anyway with aggravated manslaughter. Those are the facts. That is the entire list from 2019, last year. 10 deaths. In 5 deaths, an officer was attacked just before the shooting occurred. That is not disputed. 1 allegedly was an accident. That leaves a total of 4 deaths during a pursuit or in a standoff. So out of 4, in 2 of those cases, in fully half, the officer was criminally charged. Is it possible that more of these officers should have been charged? Of course it's possible. Justice is not always served, that's for sure. But either way, this is a very small number in a country of 325 million people. This is not genocide. It's not even close to genocide. It is laughable to suggest it is. In fact, the number of police killings is dropping. In 2015, during Barack Obama's presidency, 38 unarmed black Americans and 32 whites were slain by police. Overall totals have fallen since then, and they have fallen far more dramatically for African American men. Last year was the safest year for unarmed suspects since the Washington Post began tracking police shootings. It was the safest year for both white and black suspects. At the same time, this country remains a dangerous place for police officers. 48 of them were murdered in 2019, according to FBI data. That's more than the number of unarmed suspects killed of all races. One final number for you, because it matters. In 2018, 7,407 African Americans were murdered in the United States. If 2019 continues on a similar trajectory, and we hope it doesn't, but if it does, that would mean that for every unarmed African American shot to death in the United States by police, more than 700 were murdered by someone else, usually by someone they know. Again, those are the facts. They are not in dispute. Are African Americans being hunted, as Joy Reid recklessly claimed on MSNBC recently? Or is something else happening? Is our nation being ripped apart by a total and complete lie, a provable lie, a lie used by cynical media manipulators and unscrupulous politicians who understand that racial strife, race hatred, is their path to power, even if it destroys the country? You have the facts now, and you can decide what's really going on. Heather McDonald is the author of the book, The War on Cops. She joins us tonight. Heather, you wrote a book on this, and because so much is at stake, and because people have died and are dying, and the country's being ripped apart, we want to be sure that we have these numbers right. And so we bow to you, someone, again, who just wrote a book on this. Are the numbers that we just read correct? And what do you make of them so?
Absolutely, they're correct, Tucker. This is a narrative that is both false and dangerous. In 2015 and 2016, when we went through what now is, in retrospect, a minimal amount of civil unrest and riots throughout the country, 2,000 additional black males were killed because cops backed off of policing. Right now, we already seen crime going through the roof. We've already seen the assassinations of cops. I fear we're going to see more. And who are the people who are going to be hurt when these cops back off? If we defund the cops, we don't even need to defund them. The delegitimation of them is so great. The hatred that is being directed at them when they arrest gangbangers, gun toters, people who've just shot innocent children in the city, the hatred being directed at officers is extraordinary. Who's going to be hurt? the thousands of law-abiding residents of inner-city neighborhoods who beg for more police protection. People like a cancer amputee in the Mount Hope section of the Bronx who told me, please, Jesus, send more police, because the only time she feels safe to go into her building lobby is when the cops are there, because it's otherwise colonized by trespassing youth, selling drugs, and smoking weed. There was an elderly lady in the 41st precinct of the South Bronx who stood up in the middle of a community meeting and said, how lovely when we see the police. They are my friends. These are the voices that the media deliberately silences because they completely undermine their phony narrative about systemic police racism and white supremacy in this country.
I mean, phony doesn't begin to scratch the surface, I would say. So we are being told by demagogues on television, demagogues in office, office holders, people who run the country are telling us genocide is occurring. There is a never-ending wave of racist attacks on African Americans by police officers in which many are dying. We came up with 10 in 2019. How can they say something like that when there are no facts to support it?
And the irony is it's the Washington Post's own database that collects the unarmed statistics. As you say, Tucker, unarmed being defined extraordinarily broadly, but the Washington Post doesn't write that. Here's another interesting fact. A police officer is 18.5 times more likely to be murdered by a black male than an unarmed black male is to be murdered by a cop or killed by a cop. So there are so many facts about crime, about policing. We should not racially profile blacks for any crime rates. We should also not racially profile cops for one absolutely horrific arrest. The cops desperately want more tactical training. They want more help in de-escalating and controlling stress, but they are not systemically biased.
We need to de-escalate the rhetoric here, because this is actually threatening the country. We're teetering at this point. Heather, great to see you. Thanks so much.
It's not the country, it's civilization. Civilization itself is now at risk.
I agree with that. Thank you.